Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to share my February reads. In total, I read about 6 books and they were all pretty short. I think not even more than 300 pages. Actually one of the best reading months I've had so far, so let's get into it. Before I start, I am reading off of my journal notes because this is my second time recording this video, and yesterday when I was recording it I just kept stuttering and I wasn't really well prepared, although I really wanted to put out the video because it's already March when I'm recording this. So I think I'm gonna make it a habit to write down notes on my journal so I can read it off for you guys. First book I read is Tristana by Benito, Perez, Galdos. This is one of 2 library books that I borrowed this month, and I'm really happy that I actually finished a proper library book. I have actually using Libby, but for a physical copy, this is a first for me. Tristana is set in the late 19th century Madrid, Spain, and the story follows Tristana, who navigates life after her parents passing under the guardianship of Don Lope. Fortunately, she has no choice but to live with him due to her circumstances. She has no other guardians. Don Lope is a charismatic character but also is very hypocritical. Him and Tristana have a very complicated relationship, and Tristana just wants to gain freedom and independence and wants to just get away from his hold on her. She begins a relationship with Horatio, starts to have more ambition and dreams for herself, feeling like she could just do anything she wanted. She could be an actress, she could be a painter, a poet. It felt like the world was at her hands. However, happiness is short-lived for Tristana as she succumbs to illness, and Don Lope's hold on her it gets even stronger. The two deal with their complicated relationship, and Horatio goes away to take care of his sick aunt, and so Tristana is forced to just deal everything by herself and with someone who is mostly in control of her life. It doesn't really help her, and it feels like her dreams are getting further and further away from her. This is not my favorite book. This was actually a Melissa recommendation. I am such a fan of her. I love her book recommendations, and she recommended this if you loved Madonna in a Fur Coat, and I am such a big fan of that book. If you liked Madonna in a Fur Coat, Tristana is more the exploration of Maria Puder in a sense. Maria, who also has, you know, big dreams and ambitions in life, and Tristana also evokes that, but quite differently in a way. But if you're expecting the same love that is in Madonna in a Fur Coat, you might not feel this in Tristana. But if you like Maria as the character, you might like Tristana. But it's still a good read, so I think it's still worth giving it a try. Next book I read is The Door by Magda Szabo. The story is a relationship study between Magda and her housekeeper, Emerence. Magda hires Emerence based on good feedback from her neighbors, as she's needing a housekeeper to take care of things around the house while she's away, and she is busy herself being a writer. But then they start to clash, and Emerence's attitude and character does have quirks, and even Magda can't really understand it, but she tries to really get close to Emerence because with all of these good feedback about Emerence's diligence at work, there must be something that could soften her a little bit. Emerence is a bit eccentric as well. She has different styles not typically found in a housekeeper, but her work is justified as she cleans the house spotless, prepares their meals, but it feels like you had to follow her own schedule, whereas the boss being the one to order things around. Eventually, though, they start to warm up, but an incident occurs and it suddenly shakes this fragile foundation that Magda was trying to create with Emerence. I think the book was okay. Not my favorite of the month, but I do appreciate it as it deals with different female relationships, and I think I relate to Magda a little bit because I feel like I am somewhat of a people pleaser, and I just really want to get to know people sometimes. But then if someone is trying to put a distance or put a wall between us, then it does make me feel quite sad and frustrated. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting look of, you know, the dynamic between the two, as they're like both very different women. Next book I read is The Setting Sun by Osamu Dazai. This one is the Tuttle Publishing edition. So The Setting Sun follows the story of Kazuko, who is our narrator. She is divorced and is forced to move in the countryside with her graceful mother, and also they are aristocrats. But after the war, they don't have as much money anymore, and so they're forced to move to the countryside. Kazuko and her mother face this change in Japan post-war, where most Japanese people are becoming revolutionaries, and Kazuko herself slowly adapts to this view and beliefs, whereas her mom is still very much in her traditional, like, aristocratic ways, and you can see this sort of divide between ideologies. Kazuko still loves her mom, and it's not like her mom is someone who says it straight to her face that I don't like the things that you believe in. In fact, she's mostly just been quiet. But there are times where Kazuko can tell from her mother's face or comments that she still like lives in the old era, but is trying her best to adjust in the new world. Kazuko works in the farm and tries to make ends meet for her mom and herself while living in the countryside. They are very content with their situation. Yes, it's not the most ideal, and it's not what they're used to, especially for Kazuko, who has not grown up in this way. Definitely their happiness is short-lived with the return of her brother Naoji from war. His return just falls into more incidences where they have both different ideals, and Naoji is a very troubled man and wishes for the old Japan to come back. And he does meet his friend again, Uehara, who Kazuko actually meets earlier on before she moved to the countryside. She also starts to have this odd relationship with him because he is a married man with a daughter. Quite like this book, actually. Osamu Dazai is someone I've always been interested to read. And I actually read No Longer Human last year. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, just because I read Junji Ito's version first. And I was going in with the original book thinking the story would be the same, but it wasn't. So I will definitely give it a reread. Osamu Dazai wrote Kazuko in a very progressive way, which surprised me. He described Kazuko very beautifully, and he wrote her very, very well, which is, I was so surprised, because when I was reading No Longer Human and the way he described the female characters there, yes, it was troubling, and I think it's semi-autobiographical, and so there are sensitive themes in the book, but still I was quite surprised with this one. Especially I find Naoji and Uehara really pathetic. I get it, they have their struggles. Naoji has always come from aristocracy, and they are and he is a failed I think he was either a failed artist or writer, and so I think he has this unfulfilled dream, and also trying to get a girl, but he couldn't, and so there was just it feels hopeless for Naoji for him to have a redemption arc. And for Uehara, who is his best friend, he is someone I think like embodies that state of capitalism where he didn't come really from a affluent family. His parents, I think, were poor. I think middle class, but he seeks his fortune by doing paintings, and he does get money, a good amount of money from it, but he totally neglects his wife and kid, and he's just not a good guy. And I was reading it, and I don't know what did Kazuko see in this guy. But yeah, like I really enjoyed The Setting Sun. It was a very quick book to read as well, but in less than, I think, 160 pages, it packs a lot, and I quite like the story. I really recommend this. Next book I read is Valentino and Sagittarius by Natalia Ginzburg. These are two separate novellas, but they do have the same themes of family, friendship, trust, disappointment. Let's start off with Valentino. The story of Valentino is narrated by his sister Katerina. He is the only son of the family and one of 3 siblings. His family has placed all their trust in Valentino, and there is this phrase that they keep throwing around in the book that's actually a bit funny to me, is that he is a man of consequence. And I think they make him out to be this very righteous guy. He can lift them up in society, and I think all their efforts at work and even investing their money, all of it is with Valentino. Valentino is also said to be very handsome, and so he attracts different types of women. But one day he comes home and says that he's going to marry, but she is a much older woman, and this surprises his parents because he always just hated young girls and played around, but this time it seems like he is very, very serious. And in the meeting between Valentino and his soon-to-be wife and the parents, they were quite shocked with her appearance, and I would say they describe her as ugly, but she is rich, and they can't help but think maybe that is the end goal of Valentino. He does try to say that he isn't repulsed by her looks, and says that he loves her. The woman's name is Madalena, and she's very straightforward, frank, but while she is rich, she does try to provide for Valentino and his family, and at times is quite generous and nice towards Katerina, but yeah, she almost like limits him at sometimes. But Valentino can be very frivolous, but she tries to rein him in as much as possible. But of course, their marriage is very turbulent towards the middle of their marriage, and their constant fights affect everyone around them, especially Katerina, who's the narrator, and I think Madalena's cousin. I think his name is Kit. I actually really liked Valentino. It's a very interesting story about someone that your family has high expectations with, but just to be disappointed at. and I think Natalia Ginzburg is really great at capturing these family stories because they're very real. I think her stories kind of hit close to home, like some aspects of it. So I very much enjoyed reading these 2 novellas. But let me get started with Sagittarius. Sagittarius is about a mother who is very prideful and emotional and thinks highly of herself, but she does have ambition. And in the story, her daughters are quite grown now, so it feels like she is just left on her own and trying to find her passions and wants to set up something for herself. The story is narrated by, I think, the first daughter, which is unnamed. They only name the other daughter, who's kind of sickly. Her name is Gianna. In the story, the mother meets Scylla, who is this very enthusiastic, overly friendly lady at, I think, a cafe. In their meetings, the mother shares her dream of opening up an art gallery. Scylla agrees to open up the cafe with her. However, the mother starts to see Scylla's oddities at times when they had their meetings, and Scylla doesn't really show her other friends, even though she's been sharing stories about other people. But the mother tries to see through it and feels that, okay, Scylla is dependable and I can do business with her. Their friendship doesn't last, and Scylla shows her true colors. The story does feel very personal. I think that anyone who has a very prideful family member might kind of find this relatable. If you look at yourself as someone who's very highly capable of doing anything, but it's just the circumstances around you that doesn't allow you to like shine, but once the chance hits, you're gonna take it. I saw in my local library that they have some ebooks for Natalia Ginzburg, so I can't wait to read it. My microphone died, so I'm just gonna record what I can over here. Sorry for the audio quality change. Actually, I think my microphone might have died like even earlier on. So anyway, the last book I read this month is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is my second Toni Morrison book, and this is very emotional and also grapples with sensitive topics, themes. So if you're planning to read this, do proceed with caution. So the story of The Bluest Eye is about Pekkala Breedlove. She's, I think, 11 to 12 years old in the story. And there is this kind of time shift between some narratives of the story, and there is another narrator as well, who is the only narrator in the story, named Claudia, who is a young girl who befriends Pekkala with her sister Frida. And the other narratives are more in like third person, but how they connect or how they intertwine with Pekkala. In The Bluest Eye, Pekkala Breedlove just wants to be accepted by her community. She thinks having the bluest eyes is a sign of acceptance and beauty with the standards of the time in the 1940s. Only very few characters who are quite kind to her. Pekkala is really struggling for acceptance and being accepted by her family. She doesn't get the love that she needs from her family. There is also this hate towards her within the community. This novel really tackles the issue of how a controlled society can shape your values and your morals, and how your actions come off of all of those, and how you interact with the people around you. And there is like some characters in the book where you would think that they would ally themselves with Pekkala, but they prove themselves very toxic and just cruel, and they just let Pekkala be abused and get hurt, which I still, when I try to describe the events of the book, it's still very hard to say because it's such a emotional and heartbreaking experience for a little girl. I do recommend reading this book. It is a difficult read emotionally, theme-wise. I'm trying to explain the book further. I can't help but feel like I'm gonna cry because it is just one of the saddest books I've ever read. This type of hate still exists to this day. It is still apparent, and it doesn't hurt to be kind to one another. So that's The Bluest Eye. I think the best book I read, and it's gonna be in the top books I read. And Toni Morrison's writing actually is very difficult for me, but for some reason I got along with The Bluest Eye. I found Sula hard to read, but maybe now that I'm gonna read a little bit more of Toni Morrison's works, I have Beloved and Songs of Solomon. Once I finish those two, then I'll go back to Sula, and I might reread this again, because while I'm putting myself in a state that I feel it will take me time to recover again.
Hey everyone, so I forgot that I needed to record a video for Amok, which is the 5th book I read in February. I clearly remembered that I recorded it on the same day as I did with the other books, but for some reason it didn't get imported, or maybe I just accidentally deleted it off my DJI, so I'm just recording this from my iPhone. Amok is a story about obsession where infatuation takes a turn for the worse. We meet our unnamed narrator and doctor who gets posted in Southeast Asia, and there he meets a woman. It's his first time seeing a woman in general for the time that he has spent in Southeast Asia. She asks for his help, but then he doesn't want to help her, but he eventually gets obsessed with her and starts to have disturbing thoughts on what he's going to do with her. She is also very creeped out by him and starts to get away, but eventually he finds that she asked for help locally in the country, and that's where the story takes a turn. There is really not much for me to discuss about the whole stories coming off from that point, because anything I might describe might spoil the story, although I think I already have. But it is very short, and a lot happens in just a few pages of this short story. And this is not really my favorite. I kind of appreciate it because it does have similarities with White Nights by Dostoevsky and The Lily in the Valley by Honoré de Balzac. What the three men have in common across all three stories is that they're all isolated, they are socially recluse, they always fall in love with a woman that is unattainable. They can't get them to fall in love with them. Just a brief thoughts about The Lily in the Valley. This is a more emotional and spiritual story. Actions are more restrained given the era of the time in this story specifically, and the men seeing the woman as someone holy and pure, but their love is not what society would allow, which is a given because the woman in The Lily in the Valley, forgot her name, but she is married with kids. And in White Nights, it's more of an intense love, this yearning, as some people describe it on here, and the man feeling more intense loneliness, but ultimately he sees her fall in love with someone else. And I think among all three, to be honest, White Nights' main character is the most tame. And it's not obsessive to a fault, to a certain degree. He is not as obsessive as the other two. Lastly is Amok, where yes, he is obsessed. It's those two stories combined, but what happens if that obsession goes further than just love, and if the desire to possess someone, how far does it go? I do recommend it. It's a short story anyway. It's not that long. I think some people might like this. If you enjoyed White Nights and The Lily in the Valley, you might like this one. It's quite different at the same time, so yeah.
That's it for my February reads. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys in the next one.